When it comes to love and hip-hop, Atlanta, the drama has never been short of explosive. But nothing hits harder than when family is at the center of the storm. This time, all eyes are on Lil Scrappy and Shakira as their co-parenting relationship spirals out of control in front of the world. What was supposed to be about love, respect, and doing what's best for their son has now turned into one of the most heated and emotional meltdowns of the season. Imagine the tension when two people who once shared love and joy now can't even share. It's the same room without things breaking down into chaos. Scrappy, known for his fiery temper and unapologetic attitude, clashes with Shakira, who has always prided herself on strength and independence. Their words aren't just angry, they're sharp, personal, and filled with years of pain boiling over in a single moment. Fans who have followed their journey from the beginning were stunned, because this wasn't just a typical argument. This was raw, this was real, and this was a reminder of how fragile co-parenting can be when emotions remain unresolved. And as their son's name became the reason for battle, the cameras captured a fight that wasn't just about schedules or parenting styles, it was about pride, trust, and two hearts that still carry the weight of a complicated past. Buckle up, because this meltdown isn't just another storyline, it's a heartbreaking glimpse into love gone wrong and family under fire. The episode opened with an uneasy silence that quickly gave way to explosive tension. Lil Scrappy sat across from Shakira, his body language already telling a story before a single word left his mouth. Arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes fixed with a mix of anger and hurt. It was clear that this conversation wasn't going to end smoothly. Shakira, equally guarded, leaned back in her chair, her expression calm on the surface but burning with frustration underneath. The air between them was heavy, charged with the kind of energy that makes even the viewers at home sit up straight, knowing something big is about to unfold at first. The discussion seemed like it might stay civil. They talked about their son, about his routine, about what was best for him. But underneath every sentence was an unspoken accusation, a lingering history that refused to be ignored. Shakira pointed out Scrappy's inconsistencies, his missed visits, his lack of communication, the times she felt abandoned to handle everything alone. Scrappy didn't take it lightly. He leaned forward, his voice sharp as he fired back, accusing Shakira of painting him as a villain when he was simply trying to be present in the ways he could. The volume rose, the emotions grew hotter, and soon, it was no longer just a conversation about parenting. It was a full-on battle over respect, history, and broken trust. The cameras caught every painful detail. Shakira's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she voiced her exhaustion. She had carried so much for so long, and in that moment, her voice trembled, not just with anger but with the weight of years of struggle. Scrappy, meanwhile, pounded his hand on the table, his frustration boiling over. He wanted to be seen as a father who tried, who cared, who loved his child deeply. But the way Shakira framed it made him feel like he could never win, no matter what effort he put in. The fight became a clash of perspectives. For Shakira, it wasn't about moments here and there. It was about consistency, about showing up in ways that truly mattered. For Scrappy, it was about being given credit, about not being judged for every mistake while his efforts were overlooked. Both of them had valid feelings, but in the heat of the moment, neither could hear the other. The words grew louder, harsher, cutting deeper with every exchange. Fans watching from home were immediately torn. On one hand, they saw Shakira's pain and resilience, her refusal to sugarcoat the realities of co-parenting with a man whose lifestyle didn't always allow for stability. On the other, they saw Scrappy's raw frustration, his desperate plea to be acknowledged as more than the narrative of an absent father. Social media lit up, with hashtags trending and fans debating who was in the right, who was in the wrong, whether the situation had gone too far for repair. As the fight escalated, old wounds resurfaced. Shakira brought up past disappointments, the times she felt like Scrappy chose his career or his personal life over their son. Scrappy countered with stories of sacrifice, of moments no one knew about, of the ways he felt Shakira never gave him the benefit of the doubt. It was no longer just, About their child, it was about the years of unresolved tension that had been festering like a wound left untreated. The heartbreaking part was seeing the love that once existed between them buried beneath the anger. There were flashes in their words, hints in their expressions, that revealed this wasn't simply to people who didn't care about each other. They cared too much, that was the problem. The hurt came from love turned sour, from expectations unmet, from promises broken on both sides. Their son wasn't just a child to be raised. He was the thread tying them together, even as that thread threatened to snap under the weight of their conflict. As Scrappy raised his voice, Shakira finally broke her composure. Her voice cracked as she told him she was tired of fighting. Tired of carrying the burden alone. Tired of always being painted as the bad guy when all she wanted was stability for their son. For the first time, Scrappy fell silent. His anger momentarily softened as he looked at her, realizing the depth of her exhaustion. But instead of reconciliation, the silence only fueled the tension. Neither was ready to back down. The scene ended with Scrappy storming out, his frustration too heavy to contain. Shakira sat back, wiping her face, her calm exterior cracking as the emotions spilled through. It was a devastating reminder that co-parenting isn't just about schedules and responsibilities. It's about two people who once shared love, now forced to navigate the complexities of raising a child while carrying the baggage of their past. For the audience, it was one of the most gripping and heartbreaking moments of the season. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't staged. It was raw, real, and painfully human. Viewers saw two parents who loved their child deeply, but struggled to love each other enough to work together. And in that struggle, the reality of co-parenting played out in front of millions, leaving everyone wondering if love couldn't keep them together, could respect at least help them move forward. As the credits rolled on that scene, the question wasn't whether Scrappy and Shakira cared for their son. They clearly did. The question was whether they could put aside their personal battles long enough to give him the peace and stability he deserved. And for now, the answer seemed heartbreakingly unclear. The fallout from that heated confrontation didn't just end when Scrappy walked out of the room. In fact, it was only the beginning. Word of their clash spread quickly among the cast, crew, and of course, the fans. People began taking sides, dissecting every line, every look, every tear that had been caught on camera. Social media became a war zone. Clips of the argument were replayed endlessly, with fans cutting them into memes, reaction videos, and heated debates. Some accused Shakira of being too harsh, while others claimed Scrappy's temper proved he wasn't truly ready to co-parent in a healthy way. Behind the scenes, the tension lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. Shakira confided in close friends, voicing her exhaustion and her fear that this cycle of conflict would never end. She wanted peace, she wanted stability, and above all, she wanted her son to grow up without the chaos of constant battles between his parents. But how do you find peace when trust is broken? How do you build stability when every conversation feels like walking into a battlefield? Scrappy, on the other hand, retreated into his own circle. To his friends, he vented about feeling unappreciated, about always being painted as the villain no matter how much he tried. He spoke about the sacrifices he'd made, the times he'd been there when no one noticed, and the pain of constantly being dismissed. To him, Shakira's words weren't just criticism, they were daggers, piercing his pride and his identity as a father. And in the hip-hop world, pride is everything. The truth is, both of them were hurting. Both of them wanted the best for their child. But the gap between their perspectives was so wide that bridging it seemed almost impossible. For Shakira, being a mother meant consistency, discipline, and reliability. For Scrappy, being a father meant love, presence, and effort, even if it wasn't perfect. Both had valid points, but neither could see past their pain long enough to truly hear the other as the next episode unfolded. The tension boiled over into their interactions with others. Friends of the couple found themselves caught in the middle, unsure of how to show support without being dragged into the conflict. Some urged them to go to counseling, to find a neutral space where they could work through their differences. Others felt it was hopeless, that the resentment had grown too deep, and that the best they could hope for was to coexist without constant explosions. But for Scrappy and Shakira, coexisting wasn't enough. Every time they crossed paths, the unspoken tension hung heavy in the air. The smallest disagreements spiraled into arguments, and the larger issues, like custody schedules and financial responsibilities, became landmines waiting to explode. Their son, innocent in all of this, became the silent witness to a war neither parent truly wanted, but both seemed powerless to stop. The fans noticed too. Comment sections were filled with messages urging them to put their son first, to stop letting pride and anger overshadow what really mattered. Some fans shared personal stories of co-parenting, empathizing with Shakira's struggles or Scrappy's pain, reminding the world that behind the reality TV cameras, these were real people with real scars. Others, however, thrived on the drama, treating their meltdown as entertainment, a spectacle to be consumed rather than a family crisis to be understood. The heartbreaking reality is that co-parenting in the spotlight magnifies every flaw, every mistake, every unkind word. What most families endure behind closed doors, Scrappy and Shakira endured under the scrutiny of millions. And with every public blow-up, the path to healing seemed further away. Yet, despite the chaos, there were moments, brief, fleeting moments that hinted at the love they both shared for their son. A softening of Scrappy's voice when he spoke about missing milestones. A crack in Shakira's armor when she admitted she didn't want to fight anymore. Those moments reminded fans that beneath the rage, there was still a bond, however fragile, that might one day guide them toward peace. But for now, the pain outweighed the hope. The next confrontation was even more explosive. Scrappy accused Shakira of using their son as leverage, of shutting him out when it suited her. Shakira fired back, claiming Scrappy only showed up when the cameras were rolling, that his priorities were still rooted in fame rather than family. The words stung, each one reopening wounds that had barely begun to close. Their voices rose, their emotions spilled over, and once again, the scene ended with no resolution, just a people further apart than before. In many ways, their fight became symbolic of the larger struggles so many couples face when love fades, but parenthood remains. It was raw, it was painful, and it was a mirror reflecting the reality that co-parenting isn't easy. It requires humility, compromise, and the ability to put the child's needs above personal pride. And while Scrappy and Shakira clearly loved their son, love alone wasn't enough to shield him from the fallout of their battles. By the end of the episode, fans were left heartbroken, frustrated, and desperate for some glimmer of hope. Could these two ever put aside their bitterness? Could they learn to work together, not for themselves, but for the little boy caught in the middle? Or was this meltdown just the beginning of an endless cycle destined to repeat itself until the damage became too great to repair? The cameras faded, but the questions lingered. For Lil Scrappy and Shakira, the path ahead wasn't just about surviving another season of drama, it was about deciding what kind of future they wanted to create for their son. And the world was watching, waiting, and hoping that in the middle of all the chaos, love for their child would eventually win out. As the tension between Lil Scrappy and Shakira reached its breaking point, the aftermath began to ripple far beyond their own conversations. What had started as a private disagreement about parenting, it turned into a full-blown storyline that everyone had an opinion on. Cast members whispered about it behind the scenes. Family members worried about the impact it was having on the child. And fans filled comment sections with both sympathy and criticism. It was no longer just a fight between two parents, it was a spectacle, a headline, and a debate about what co-parenting should and shouldn't look like. Scrappy, feeling cornered by the public perception that he was failing as a father, doubled down on his determination to prove otherwise. He began posting more about his son, sharing moments of love and fatherhood that showed his softer side. To some, it looked like an effort to repair his image. To others, it was proof that he truly cared and wanted to be present. But beneath the surface, the pain of Shakira's accusations lingered. for a man who had fought his entire career to be taken seriously. The suggestion that he wasn't good enough as a father cut him deeper than any diss track or industry beef ever could. Shakira, meanwhile, chose a different path. She didn't flood social media with responses or go on long rants. Instead, she stayed firm, allowing her silence and composure to speak for her. To her supporters, this was a sign of strength. A refusal to let herself be dragged into a never-ending cycle of back-and-forth arguments. To her critics, it was avoidance, an unwillingness to acknowledge Scrappy's efforts. Either way, her calm contrasted sharply with Scrappy's visible frustration, and the public interpreted that difference in 1,000 different ways. The heartbreaking part of this story was the child at the center of it all, while fans argued over who was right and who was wrong. Those closest to the family knew that the real challenge was protecting a young boy from the fallout of his parents' battles. Children are more perceptive than we often realize. And no matter how much Scrappy and Shakira tried to shield him, the tension inevitably seeped through. Every raised voice, every slammed door, every tear shed in frustration left an imprint. The show itself captured moments that peeled back the layers of both parents' pain. In one emotional scene, Scrappy admitted to a friend that he was terrified of failing his son the way he felt failed in his own childhood. His voice cracked as he spoke about wanting to break generational cycles to give his child a life better than his own. It was a vulnerable moment that reminded viewers of the humanity behind the headlines. For all his bravado and temper, Scrappy was still a man grappling with his own scars. Trying to rewrite his story through fatherhood, Shakira had her own moment of honesty. In a conversation with a confidant, she revealed just how exhausting it had been to carry so much of the parenting load on her own. She admitted that she wasn't perfect, that sometimes her frustration boiled over, but that every choice she made came from a place of love for her child. Tears rolled down her face as she confessed that what she wanted more than anything was peace, not just for herself, but for her son. For viewers, it was a reminder that beneath the strong exterior was a mother stretched thin, fighting for stability in a world that often felt unstable. As these personal confessions played out on screen, fans began to shift their perspective. Some who had been quick to judge started to understand that this wasn't about villains and heroes, it was about two flawed human people trying to navigate one of life's hardest challenges under the spotlight of reality TV. The narrative became less about blame and more about the universal struggle of co-parenting, a struggle that millions of families could relate to in their own way. The question on everyone's mind, however, remained the same. Could Scrappy and Shakira find common ground? Could they put aside their anger and resentment long enough to focus on their son's well-being? Or were they destined to keep clashing with their child caught in the crossfire? The show didn't provide easy answers. Each episode teased moments of potential reconciliation, only for new arguments to flare up, reminding viewers just how fragile the peace between them really was. In one particularly powerful scene, Scrappy and Shakira sat down with a mediator. The tension was thick, the silence heavy. At first, neither wanted to give an inch. Scrappy spoke passionately about his love for his son, insisting that he deserved recognition for the effort he put in. Shakira responded with quiet but firm words, explaining that love was important, but consistency mattered more. The conversation didn't magically solve everything, but it planted a seed. For the first time, they both sat in the same space and acknowledged each other's pain, even if they weren't ready to forgive or forget by the end of the season. The future of their co-parenting journey remained uncertain. Some fans were hopeful, believing that their love for their son would eventually force them to find peace. Others were skeptical, convinced that the wounds between them were too deep to ever fully heal. What was undeniable, however, was that their story had struck a chord. It was messy, it was emotional, and it was painfully real. Lil Scrappy and Shakira's Meltdown wasn't just another reality TV fight. It was a mirror reflecting the challenges so many parents face when relationships end, but the responsibility of raising a child continues. It was a reminder that beneath the lights, the cameras, and the drama, these are real people with real struggles. And while the world may watch with fascination, the stakes for them couldn't be higher. This wasn't just about winning an argument, it was about shaping a child's future. As the credits rolled on their season, fans were left with lingering questions. Would they ever find a way to co-parent peacefully? Could they set aside their differences long enough to give their son the childhood he deserved? Or was this story destined to play out in cycles of conflict, heartbreak, and public spectacle? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. Their fight had become one of the most unforgettable storylines in love and hip-hop history. Not because of the drama, but because of the raw humanity at its core. And that's the reality, what we just witnessed: two parents locked in a battle of pride, pain, and responsibility, with their child at the very center of it all. Lil Scrappy and Shakira's co-parenting meltdown may have played out on Love and Hip Hop Atlanta. But for anyone watching closely, it was more than just television drama. It was a reminder of how difficult it is to raise a child when love fades. Trust is broken and communication collapses. What makes it even more powerful is that millions of viewers could see themselves in their struggle. Maybe you've lived through a similar fight. Maybe you've watched someone close to you wrestle with the same challenges. The truth is, their story is messy, heartbreaking, and raw, but it's also real. So now we want to hear from you. Do you think Scrappy and Shakira can ever find peace for the sake of their son? Or is this a battle that will continue to repeat itself season after season? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because your voice matters in these conversations. And if you want to keep up with every twist, every fight, and every emotional moment from love and hip-hop, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. This is only the beginning, and you don't want to miss what comes next. Stay tuned, because when family and fame collide, the story is never really over.